Alright. We're gonna wait a minute and let anybody else get set up. That way we'll have something. I'm gonna have some spooky music going for the moment. There we go. Spooky music. Cool. We're gonna wait a minute, see if some people show up to the campfire. Because, I mean, you really can't tell many good ghost stories with only one person. So we're gonna wait a minute. And I think I'm gonna put these in order so that they're, you know, there's a funnier one, and then a scarier one, and then a funnier one, and then two scarier ones. Hey, Pengear. We're waiting to see if we get any more people to come listen to some scary stories. As we should. We're waiting. We're just hanging out. So far we have 2 people around the campfire, which is pretty good. It's pretty good. But I feel like we could do better. So we're gonna wait a minute. See if anyone shows up at 6. And yes, don't worry, the music is royalty free. Like, the good news is, I'm not partnered on YouTube yet anyways, but still, I don't want to risk a copyright strike over there. I think I'll let the first ad of the day go through while we wait. I'm guessing you guys can't actually hear the music all that well. Hang on. There we go. Got some good spooky music. Hanging out. Honestly, I'm probably going to clip each story and have it be its own video because this could be a series. It really could be. Though probably not like the reading no sleep ones, because no sleep authors can get a little... It's not even that they're getting annoyed, it's that people are just not doing their stories justice. Let's be honest. So there is that to take into account. Which is why going with, you know, regular old folktales, probably your better plan. We're gonna let the first ad run through, and then I'll start from there. People can join us as they come. It'll be fine. This is not likely to be a particularly long stream, but it is probably going to be a pretty good stream. I will admit, it's pretty fun to be able to see all of the movement that my hair has. Like, look at how cool that looks. It's all wiggly. That's not a thing y'all normally get to see, because normally I'm down here at the bottom of the screen. This is very fun. Y'all actually get to see my most of my outfit. Hang on. There we go. Now you can see my entire outfit. Even my tail wiggles. It's very exciting. All right. Twitch is still over here. Ad starting soon. Are you sure about that? Because you've been telling me that for the past, you know, hot minute. All right. I can't tell if that's actually running or not. Someone tell me if the ad is actually running, because I can't actually tell. It just says starting soon, because reasons. No, I do not understand why Twitch does the thing it does. I have no answers. Okay, it's in progress. We're going. Slowly but surely. We'll get there. So once that's out of the way, we're gonna head right into the Yellow Ribbon, which is honestly a folktale that I've read a lot. Like, a weird amount. This one keeps coming up. Though it's normally the green ribbon, or the ruby ribbon, or the... You get the idea. There's a lot of ribbons. And they all serve the same purpose, but we'll find that out. Hey, no reader. All right. Ad progress is about 10 seconds out. We're going places. You're not late. This is the stream. We're telling campfire stories. All right. I'm gonna turn down my background music here because I can hear it. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but you know. All right. The Yellow Ribbon. This is it says Wisconsin folklore, but honestly, all over the Midwest. You will read this one all over the Midwest, perpetually. Jane wore a yellow ribbon around her neck every day. And I mean every day. Rain or shine, whether it matched her outfit or not. It annoyed her best friend Johnny after a while. He was her next-door neighbor and had known Jane since she was 3. When he was young, he had barely noticed the yellow ribbon, but now that they were in high school together, it bothered him. Still, why do you wear that yellow ribbon around your neck, Jane? He'd ask her every day, but she wouldn't tell him. Still, in spite of the aggravation, Johnny thought she was cute. He asked her to the soda shop for an ice cream sundae. Then he asked her to watch him play in the football game. Then he started seeing her home. And come the spring, he asked her to the dance. Jane always said yes when he asked her out, and she always wore a yellow dress to match the ribbon around her neck. It finally occurred to Johnny that he and Jane were going steady, and he still didn't know why she wore the yellow ribbon around her neck. So he asked her about it yet again, and yet again, she didn't tell him. Maybe someday I'll tell you about it, she'd reply. Someday? That answer annoyed Johnny, but he shrugged it off because Jane was so cute and fun to be with. Well, time flew past, as it has a habit of doing, and one day Johnny proposed, and Jane accepted. They planned a big wedding, and Jane hinted that she might tell him about the yellow ribbon around her neck on their wedding day. But somehow, what with the preparations and his beautiful bride and the lovely reception, Johnny never got around to asking Jane about it. And when he did remember, she got a bit teary-eyed and said, "We're so happy together. What difference does it make?" And Johnny decided she was right. Johnny and Jane raised a family of 4 with the usual ups and downs, laughter and tears. When their golden anniversary rolled around, John once again asked Jane about the yellow ribbon around her neck. It was the first time he'd brought it up since the week after their wedding. Whenever their children asked him about it, he always hushed them, and somehow none of the kids dared ask their mother. Jane gave Johnny a sad look and said, "Johnny, you've waited this long. You can wait a while longer." And Johnny agreed. It was not until Jane was on her deathbed a year later that Johnny, seeing his last chance slip away, asked Jane one final time about the yellow ribbon she wore around her neck. She shook her head a bit at his persistence and then said with a sad smile, "Okay, Johnny, you can go ahead and untie it." With shaking hands, Johnny fumbled for the knot and untied the yellow ribbon around his wife's neck. And Jane's head fell off! Honestly, this is one of those folk tales that I have heard and or read so many times. Oh my goodness. I always read it as the green ribbon, though. I'm very fascinated that in Wisconsin it's the yellow ribbon. So that is very interesting. We're going to move from one headless bride to another headless bride. This one is from the Yellowstone National Park Ghost Stories. And yes, really, Yellowstone has a lot of ghost stories. I mean, it makes sense, seeing as it's a place you camp, and campfires are where you tell ghost stories, but man, oh man, Yellowstone has some real dingers. Dang. This one is called The Headless Bride. Once, there was a lovely young woman growing up in a wealthy shipping family in New York. In those days, wealthy young women were expected to make their debut in society and to marry a wealthy young man from a good family. But our young lady was a bit of a rebel. When she grew old enough to marry, she scorned the wealthy young society men in favor of an older man who was working as a servant in her house. Of course, there was a big argument within the family when the young woman announced her choice of husband. Her parents were furious, particularly her father, who accused the servant of courting his daughter in order to gain a prominent position in the shipping company. When the young lady insisted upon the marriage, her father gave the couple a lump sum of cash with the stipulation that they leave New York after the wedding and never come back. By the time the young couple reached Old Faithful Inn in Yellowstone, the new husband had gambled away all of the money that his wife's family had bestowed upon the newlyweds. There was barely enough money for the couple to finish their honeymoon trip, and nothing whatsoever with which to buy a house or start a family. The young woman was upset with her husband. They had quarreled often about money during their honeymoon journey, and by this time she knew that her father had been right about the greed of her new husband. He was obviously more interested in her money than her. Still, the couple was flat broke and needed something to pay the connoisseurs here at Yellowstone, so she telephoned her father to ask him for some more money. Her father refused to give her a penny. That night, the couple had a terrific fight in the relative privacy of their bedroom at the inn. The husband stalked out of the inn in a fury, leaving his bride locked in her room. The bride did not emerge for days, and finally the staff of the inn sent someone in to check on her. No one answered when the housekeeper opened the door. Using the housekeeping key, the staffer who was sent stepped into the room and gasped in shock. The room looked as if a hurricane had swept through the interior. Clothes were strewn everywhere, and the bedclothes were partially on the floor. Worse, the housekeeper was overwhelmed by the metallic odor that permeated everything. There was no sign of the bride, but the stink that wafted from the attached bathroom hinted at what the housekeeper might see. Lying in the bathtub in a pool of congealed blood was the body of the unhappy bride, which ended grotesquely in a ragged stump of a neck. Her head was nowhere to be seen. The housekeeper's screams summoned the rest of the staff. The authorities were summoned, the family was notified, and the room cleaned. Everything was done to locate the murderer, but he was never apprehended. Finally, the whole story was hushed up to avoid scandal to the prominent family. A few days after the discovery of the murder, a foul smell up in the crow's nest where the musicians often played for evening dances was traced to its source: the bride's severed head. tousled blonde curls framed the wide-eyed, horror-twisted face, already beginning to rot. The burial of the poor murdered bride should have been the end of this terrible incident. And so it proved, until one midnight, when a staff member who was up late, reading a book, heard a strange noise coming from the lobby. It was the stroke of midnight when he hurried out onto the balcony and looked upward, seeing the source of the noise. He looked up towards the crow's nest far above and saw a glowing figure in white slowly descending the stairs from the crow's nest. Tucked under its arm was a tousle-curled, wide-eyed head, frozen with horror. The man watched the bride descend the steps and float along the corridor until she reached the door of her room. And then she vanished. Oh, man. So that's actually based around an actual inn in Yellowstone, really truly. Which is one of my favorite things. Haunted hotels, haunted everything. Like, it's honestly one of the better places, like one of the better things that you can grab from a story is, if it's a real place, you can then go there, which is always very fun. I'm actually looking forward a lot on a couple of trips that I've planned sometime in the future to go see a couple of different haunted places. Because the Midwest also has a lot of haunted places. Let me be really honest. They're like, oh, everyone's all about the Scottish moors and the Highlands and the... Nah, man. Midwest is fucking terrifying. Let me be real honest there. Like, we got some weird shit, my man. We got some weird shit. It's a whole thing. Now, I'm gonna switch over to a little bit of a funnier one because, you know, I think we need a little bit of a break from the beheadings. Well, sort of. This is a New Mexico ghost story called The Skeleton. The boy had been out looking for work all day with no luck. When night fell, he was far from home. He decided to spend the night in an empty, run-down house. The minute he laid down, he fell into a sound sleep. The boy was awakened quite suddenly by a thump on the roof. With a pounding heart, he sat up and lit a candle. A voice called out, "I'm falling down!" The boy scrambled out of the way, just as a skeletal arm came crashing to the floor. The voice shouted again, "I'm falling down!" And another arm landed beside the first. Then a leg, the chest, and a second leg. Before he could count to 10, a complete skeleton was standing in front of him, grinning madly. The boy lifted his chin and grinned back, determined not to show his fear. The skeleton was delighted by the boy's spirit and said, "You have courage, son. Are you brave enough to wrestle me?" The boy was terrified, but he didn't dare refuse this strange apparition. The skeleton and the boy wrestled back and forth, up and down the room. Remembering a trick his older brother had taught him, he twisted suddenly and threw the skeleton to the ground. "You've won," the skeleton said. "Such courage deserves a reward. Come, I'll give you my treasure." The boy was startled. What kind of treasure could an old skeleton have? "Pick me up and carry me on your back to the next room," said the skeleton. "Remember to take your candle." The boy picked up the skeleton and put it on his back. Then he retrieved his candle from the corner of the room and carried the skeleton into the next room. As they passed through the doorway, the skeleton blew out the candle. "Now stop that," he said, annoyed. The skeleton cackled madly. The boy lit the candle again and the skeleton blew it out. "I'm going to drop you," the boy threatened. He lit the candle again, and again the skeleton blew it out. The boy dropped the skeleton on the floor. "I will break all your bones," he said. Impressed, the skeleton said, "You are so courageous and strong, I will let you see my treasure." The boy lit the candle and turned into the room. It was filled with piles and piles of gold and silver and jewels. "I want you to promise me something," the skeleton said. The boy drew his gaze reluctantly from the magnificent treasure and looked at the skeleton. "I want you to promise that you will gather all the poor people you can find in one day and give them each a bag of money. The rest you can keep for yourself." It would be a good thing to share his wealth with the needy, the boy decided, so he agreed to do what the skeleton asked. The skeleton gave a happy laugh and began to disappear piece by piece. First his head, then his leg, then his chest, then his other leg, and so on until he was gone. The boy did just as he had promised, and when he had finished the task, he took the rest of the treasure back to his family. They lived in comfort all of their days. I really like this one. This is actually, I think, my favorite of all of the little like ghost stories, campfire stories, etc. that I went through for this evening. Like, there's some really great, really spooky ones, but this one's just very funny. Because, I mean, honestly, oh, you keep that up, I'm gonna drop you. Like, bro, who does this skeleton think he's messing with? This kid is just like, nah, I'm not messing with that. I will drop you. You're literally made of bones. I also wonder how the skeleton blew out the candle, because skeletons don't have lungs. That's kind of the whole point. They have no guts. It's kind of the gig. Oh man. I have 2 more ghost stories for everyone tonight, but I'm gonna wait until after the next ad. So, that's about 5-ish minutes from now. So I want you guys to tell me what your favorite campfire stories are. What are ones that you've heard a bunch, even if you can't really remember them? Ones you heard as a kid? Because there's a distinct possibility that what you've heard was a regional variant of a folktale that's been going around for hundreds of years. It's very, very fun. Honestly, there's a couple from my childhood that I cannot find. Nowhere, no way, no how. I'm telling you, I honestly think they were actually made up on our playground. One of them is Clink Thump Thump, and that one, oh gosh. I don't actually know if anybody else remembers that one either. But let me tell you, that one was a doozy. That got people. Scared the heck out of me, and I was the one telling it. Why is it that playgrounds really make for one of the best places to tell campfire stories? Or is it just that we were all adrenaline seekers and we're, sitting there telling ghost stories in broad daylight, scaring the heck out of each other? I mean, you've got the classics like Bloody Mary, which, of course, I'm pretty sure everyone has played it at least one sleepover. If not, well, I'm not sure what you're doing, but, it's a thing. There's Ouija boards, which I'm really not sure why Hasbro turned that into a toy. Hasbro really took the anything can be a toy thing a little too seriously. Like, we don't like that. Yep, Bloody Mary, which is one of those where if you're looking in a mirror and you say it 3 times, supposedly she will come out of the mirror and kill you. Admittedly, I haven't ever had that occur, but also, probably not the best plan to continue messing with fate like that. Because there's only so many times you can pull that off before something actually happens. And it's not even gonna be because you did the thing. It's gonna be because statistics does that to you. You do a thing enough times and something stupid's gonna happen. It's just how it is. Oh man. Does anyone else have any childhood favorites for stories, or are there any? Let's see. We have 2 more stories to go, but I'm taking a quick break because, I can only narrate so quickly. And also, as soon as the ad starts, I want to be able to pause so that you guys don't miss anything. Let's see. I know for a fact that anyone who's watched BuzzFeed Unsolved has seen at least one thing involving Kansas and our stupid bridges. Oh my gosh. Hang on, this is... My dramatic music's getting a little too dramatic. It's a little too dramatic. It needs to calm down. But we've got bridges that supposedly have ghosts, bridges that supposedly have devils, bridges that supposedly have demons. There's all sorts of things. There's also dead-end roads that supposedly have ghosts, and a lot of hotels. A lot of haunted hotels. And a lot of haunted old buildings. Admittedly, I've done a little bit of road tripping on a couple occasions in college, and we didn't really actually see anything, which was kind of disappointing. I'm not sure if I want ghosts to be real or not. It's one of those things that, you think about it, and you're like, oh, that'd be really cool. And then you think about it again, and you're like, I'm not so sure on that. Because there's all sorts of really crazy shit. You've got cryptids, you've got, And I kind of bundle them all into the same belief thing. Because if aliens and Bigfoot are real, if Mothman's real, why wouldn't ghosts be real? So, I'm really on the fence of, I don't know if I believe that at all or not. But it's kind of an all or nothing for me. Like, I don't know. Is there anyone who has had a paranormal experience themselves? We have about 15 seconds until ad break, and then after that I will start up the next story. But, man, there's all sorts of just weird stuff that has happened. The Sally House is up in Atchison, you're not wrong. The Sally House is what I was referring to with the BuzzFeed Unsolved, because they went and spent the night there twice. There's really not an explanation for the Sally House either, which is fascinating. Oh yes, much like doofuses, but I do enjoy their content quite a bit. It says ads starting soon, so we're gonna give it a second. Oh yeah, the Sally House certainly exists. None of its stuff really lines up, though. Like, a lot of places, the histories will line up so that you're like, oh, okay, this ghost belonged to X, Y, or Z. The Winchester House is a great example of that. The Sally House, none of it really tracks. The stories don't line up. I don't know. It just doesn't track. So that's my personal gripe with the Sally House. But I also, lived in Lawrence for 4 years, near Stull Cemetery, which is supposedly a hellmouth. So, anybody who watches Buffy will have a concept of that. Also Supernatural, because if I remember correctly, the show starts up in Lawrence. Stull Cemetery, not actually that scary. Pretty boring. I'm not gonna lie. I wouldn't recommend spending the night there because, you'd be out in the middle of essentially a field and you're gonna get eaten alive by bugs, but to each their own, I guess. Do what you're doing. Overall, I haven't really seen any hellmouth things in Lawrence, and I was there for quite a while. Which is, of course, a whole thing. Alright, now, let's start on our fourth story. Bloody Mary Wales. This is an excerpt from the book Spooky Indiana. Old Man Wales was an evil man who loved money more than anything in the world except his wife. In his lust for wealth, he supplemented his farm income by catching runaway slaves who were escaping to freedom through Indiana. Wales would chain the ex-slaves up in his barn cellar until he could collect the reward on him. When he couldn't find slaves, he'd capture freemen and sell them into slavery. When the Civil War ended slavery, it was a disaster for the evil Wales, who no longer had a profitable source of income to supplement his farm work. And then, his beloved wife died in childbirth. Overnight, Wales fell to pieces. He hated the child, a little girl named Mary, that had killed his wife. He neglected her, dressing her in rags, making her do all the farm chores, and half-starving her. In spite of this cruel treatment, Mary grew into a sweet girl who loved her wicked father. As Mary reached adulthood, the resemblance to her dead mother was striking. Wales saw his dead wife every time he looked at his daughter who had caused her death. One night, after a hefty bout of drinking, Wales lumbered into Mary's bedroom and stabbed her repeatedly. Mary woke screaming and thrashed around in agony, trying to fight off her father as blood spurted everywhere and bits of torn flesh littered the bedclothes and fell to the floor. When she was dead, Old Man Wales carried her down to the basement, dug a grave, and tossed her body into it. 2 nights later, when Old Man Wales came back from doing his nightly chores, he found Mary standing in the kitchen, her nearly severed head lolling against one shoulder as she stirred an empty kettle. A pool of steaming blood lay beneath her feet, and the bits of skin from her knife-slashed face were breaking off and falling into the kettle. "Father," Bloody Mary hissed. Old Man Wales screamed and leapt out the kitchen door. When he glanced over his shoulder, the apparition was gone. A week later, Old Man Wales looked up from reading the newspaper to find Bloody Mary sitting in the chair opposite him, her knife-slashed dress covered in blood. Her tattered hands were busy knitting him a shirt. "Father," she hissed through knife-scored lips. Blood fell from her body like rain as she flew across the room towards him, knitting needles held like knives. Old Man Wales fled the house in a panic with 2 deep cuts scored across his back. He cowered in the barn for several days, afraid to go near his house. As he should be. Hey, Daryl. After nearly a week of sleeping in the hay and eating raw food from the garden, he decided it was safe to return to his house. The spirit must be gone by now. Old Man Wales hurried into the kitchen, eager for a wash and a shave after sleeping so many nights in the barn. He pumped an ewer of water and took it over to the little shaving mirror they kept on the far wall. When he looked in the mirror, Old Man Wales saw glowing red eyes and the knife-scored face of Bloody Mary. Her once fair lips were split down the center and blood dripped from them as she smiled. "Father," she hissed, raising blood-stained fingers. Her nails were long and sharpened like the claws of a beast. She reached out of the mirror and slapped her father twice across the face. Old Man Wales screamed, blood streaming from 4 slashes on his cheeks. He ran from the house and leapt into the safety of the barn, his heart pounding so hard his chest ached with it. "Father," a voice hissed softly a few paces to his right. Old Man Wales screamed and whirled around. Bloody Mary stood and smiled at him through her blood-stained, razor-sharp teeth. Her tattered tongue was bleeding from several places, as if it had been scored by a butcher's knife. She pointed above her head, and Old Man Wales saw a noose hanging from the rafters beside the ladder to the loft. The rope looked inviting, hanging there in the dust-speckled sunbeam. Obediently, Old Man Wales placed his hands on the rung of the ladder and started to climb. We are indeed doing spooky stories. I think this is probably one of my favorite Bloody Mary origins because I really don't prefer the essentially European tale of, yes, Mary the First was so terrible that now she's a ghost and will come out of a mirror and murder you. Like that, come on. But a vengeful ghost? That I can see. That I can definitely see. So, this last story is called Vengeance, and it's a California ghost story. When the samurai warrior Kane first came to California from Tokyo, he brought his new wife, the beautiful Ishi. She was an ideal wife, gentle, attentive, and a wonderful cook. Kane was the envy of his new neighbors, but he was a proud man. When a wealthy family moved into the neighborhood, Kane cast his eye upon their lovely daughter, Aiko, and desired her. In his mind, Ishi was the second best, so Kane plotted to rid himself of his wife so he could woo and win the fair Aiko. On a stormy night on the way home from a great banquet, Kane pushed Ishi over the cliff and into the bay. No one heard her scream through the howling wind. No one suspected foul play when Kane came rushing back to the banquet hall, shouting for help because his poor wife had slipped and fallen over the cliff. Kane acted the part of the bereaved husband to perfection. He gave Ishi a splendid funeral. It wasn't until he was alone in his house that Kane relaxed and drank to his success. Outside, the wind whipped against the house, making the walls rattle and shake. A stray breeze swept through the sleeping room with a whisper. Vengeance. Vengeance. Kane sat up and blinked as a dark figure stepped into the room. Its long, tangled black hair hung over the dirty, blood-stained kimono. Its face was crushed and broken, with one eyeball hanging from the socket. The ghost of Ishi reached out a broken hand towards her husband, smiling through the shattered remains of her teeth. Vengeance, she whispered. Vengeance. Kane screamed in terror, leapt out the window, and ran to a neighbor's house. Mistaking his fear for grief, the neighbors took him in and insisted he stay with them during his first weeks of bereavement. A month passed as Kane waited for Ishi's ghost to reappear, but she'd vanished. Relieved, Kane decided it was safe to bring Aiko and her family to see his home. As he escorted Aiko's parents around the garden, he felt a hand on his arm. Kane turned around and found himself facing a beautiful Ishi, who kissed him and whispered in his ear, "Vengeance." Laughing, Ishi danced away, waving to Aiko and her parents as she passed. Aiko glared after her in a jealous rage. Fearing that Aiko might end the betrayal, Kane pressed forward with his suit, arranging for a grand engagement feast to prove his devotion. Friends, neighbors, and family came to the banquet hall to laugh and toast over food and wine. Kane was very pleased with his success, but when he looked across the hall, he saw the ghost of beautiful young Ishi walk into the room and stand demurely in the corner. He paused mid-sentence and stared in horror as she laughed and began to change. Her body twisted and broke before Kane's eyes, her face collapsing inward, bleeding, her black hair tangling, her eyeball popping out of its socket. "Vengeance," she whispered. "No, no," Kane shouted. Around him, Aiko and her parents and the guests stared. None of them could see the ghost. As Ishi drifted out the door, Kane followed, vowing she would haunt him no more. The ghost drifted along the path, with Kane running after her, shouting and cursing. Suddenly, the ghost stopped at the place where Kane had pushed her. She turned to face Kane and started to grow, her crushed, bloody body and her dirty eyeballs swaying, her shattered teeth gleaming in the moonlight. "Vengeance!" she screamed and lunged at Kane. The samurai stepped back, his face contorting in fear. His foot slipped suddenly on the loose earth and he plunged backwards over the edge of the cliff, his body fatally smashing into the rocks far below. That same night, a terrible storm beat against his house. Lightning hit the roof and the house burned to the ground. Neighbors claimed they could hear a voice in the wind saying one word over and over. Vengeance. Honestly, this one was really good. I really enjoyed narrating this one. This was quite a fun one. Overall, I think there's some really solid United States and other folklore. Because we've got ghost stories, folk tales, fables. Like, there's so much stuff to unpack. I just picked 5 out of, 50 bajillion of them. It's like trying to pick a favorite SCP, okay? You know how many of those there are. There's even more folk tales. Dead to rights. It's a whole thing. So that was 5 different spooky stories to sort of get us ready for the Phasmophobia-a-thon coming on Friday. Which, we're gonna start this hype train. I'm not sure how it's gonna go, but boy howdy, we're gonna start it. Like, there's a chance that I'm about to get myself into a lot of trouble and have to play like 10 hours of Phasmophobia, but I'm willing to risk it because I'm very interested in this game, and they just put out a new update. There are now 24 types of ghosts with all sorts of different things, and oh boy, apparently solo hunting is one of the more interesting choices that I have made, because having more than one person gives the ghost something else to focus on. But with just one person, well, the instant that ghost starts hunting, I had either better hide, run away, or find some other way to get rid of it, because I'm it. That's what Friday is going to be. It's going to be a lot of learning on the go. Because Phasmophobia as a game it's been in existence since 2018, I think? Give me just a tick, let me look. Oh, come on, give it here. I can't spell today. This is fine. It's fine. There we go. Come on. Steam is not working with me today. It's fine. But I'm guessing it's about 20. Yeah. It is indeed, hopefully, going to be a hype train. But the whole goal is to sort of rev myself back up to start streaming again, because I have been streaming, but I kind of hit a rut. I kind of hit a back-end loop of, man, I don't know what I'm gonna stream. I don't know if people even want to see me stream. You know, the same thing that always happens with every streamer. So, I decided to take on a new challenge, and I decided to take you guys along for the ride. And that's essentially where we're gonna be on Friday, is hopping in a giant van and playing essentially Scooby-Doo and figuring out what type of ghost it is, because this time it's not an old white man in a mask. It's an actual ghost. And there's 24 types of them. I don't think I'm gonna start on hard mode because I, you know, like myself. But beyond that, it really is going to be a case of every man for themselves. I am going to die a lot. We all know I'm gonna die a lot. It's okay. But it's gonna be really fun, and for every sub I'll play another 15 minutes. And I have heard tales of people showing up to sub hype trains just to make the person play 24 hours of a video game. I don't think that's going to happen, but Lord knows it might. And if that does end up being the case, if it ends up at more than 5 or 6 hours, I'll probably end up splitting it up, because I can't sit still that long. My sanity would absolutely drain out my ears. But I will go as long as I possibly can on Friday night so that you all can have as many scares as you would like. Because we all know that I am a jumpy bitch. I may narrate well, but the instant that thing gets after me in the game, I'm gonna be screaming and running like an absolute child. And the inevitability is really, it's there. Because either I'll figure out what the ghost is and I'll drive away, or the ghost will murder me. And it's pretty 50-50 on what's gonna happen, because it'll be my very first time even opening the game. Which is a lot. It's a whole thing. Alright, those were our 5 scary stories this evening. Does anyone else have any, I don't know, good haunted tales, good urban legends? Like, we've got a lot of really creepy cryptids around the Midwest that don't get talked about a lot, but I'm not going to talk about them because I don't want to draw their attention. Because I happen to like living, at least for the most part. What if I was a ghost? Wait, can you ghost hunt as a ghost? Is that an option? I don't know if that's an option. Like, what if there's ghost hunting ghosts? What if there's ghost detectives who are like, that's their whole thing? Huh. Well, now I'm gonna be thinking about that all night. Ghost hunting ghosts. Huh. Alright. The dramatic music got a little too dramatic again. Had to turn it back down. It keeps doing that. Mothman is the best cryptid. Mothman is my favorite cryptid. I love Mothman a lot. His whole shtick is just very funny. Man, this dramatic music keeps getting more dramatic. All right, calm down. Calm down. Man, I'm trying to wrap up and this stuff's just ramping up. Whew. But yeah, so I think that is about all I've got until Friday when we start Phasmophobia up for the first time, and you guys get to watch me absolutely scared out of my mind because I'm gonna die to a ghost multiple times. I will see you all on Friday, hopefully for the Hype Train stream, and that's what I got for you tonight. I will see everyone later.